he's probably shown maybe a little bit more durability than Sasaki has, over the last handful of years. The Rockies sort of need something here, and this could be the beginning of sort of pushing this group of pitchers up to the major leagues.
Okay, the Colorado Rockies have work to do with their major league club. Let's see if they can find themselves an ace. The name is Chase Dollander. He is the top prospect according to Baseball America. Let's dive in. It's a BA prospect profile. Scott Braun, JJ Cooper, Geoff Pontes. Geoff, Chase Dollander, best arm in the organization right now, and I'm including big leaguers. Would you agree?
I think you can probably argue that this is one of the most talented pitchers the Rockies have ever had in their organization. Kind of going back, looking at some of the names that have been, top prospects. John Gray, I know JJ and I talked about this sort of off air as we were kind of writing up our reports during the off season, getting things ready for the handbook. And, maybe there's Jeff Francis, you have Ubaldo Jimenez. Jimenez probably had the most success, certainly John Gray, but he's somebody that, almost immediately upon coming into pro ball, the reports started to be a little bit less optimistic than what we had seen when he was, a draftee or, coming into his draft year. I think when we look at Dollander, yeah, he had slid back a little bit and fallen behind Paul Skeens. Who wouldn't among college pitchers in that 2023 class? He had a really good year. Handled high A very, very well, went up to double A. I think one of the things that was most encouraging about Dollander is they really let him go 90 to 100 pitches plus multiple times, particularly in double A. He was really working some of those, better Eastern League lineups, which are pretty talented toward the end of the season, and showed an ability to pitch. Now, we get into the stuff. It is electric stuff. It might be some of the best stuff that we've seen from any Rockies pitcher, including Jimenez, who threw very hard. Dollander this year sat 96 to 97 miles per hour, was up to 100 miles per hour. Traditionally, just looking at the flat numbers, he doesn't get a ton of ride on it, but based on his release height, which is really, really low, he gets a lot of ride for his release height, which creates a really sort of flat, difficult plane. It's kind of similar in that sense to like a Jacob deGrom fastball or a Gerrit Cole fastball, where it has that flat plane of approach. It's harder for hitters to sort of get on plane with that in terms of the barrel. Mixes in a few different breaking ball shapes. He's got a hard cutter that sits in the upper 80s that he will touch 90, 91, 92. A little bit of ride and some cut. Got a more traditional curveball. He'll show a changeup as well. But really everything works off of that fastball. And, it's sort of a what we would call a low launch fastball. So when you have a fastball like that, it's much harder to sort of get on plane because it doesn't have that sort of same downhill movement that you see on most fastballs. So he might be a guy, and I wrote an article about this in the offseason. He could be a guy this year that potentially cracks that Coors code. There's only been one Rockies pitcher, I think, in history that has a career ERA under 4, and that's Ubaldo Jimenez. I think Dollander might be next in line, and we could be looking back 5 or 6 years from now and saying, all right, maybe this is sort of what you need to hack Coors. You need, this sort of weird fastball shape with a lot of velocity, and that might buy you, a little bit more leeway than the typical arsenal will.
So good news, Rockies. If this works, you can replicate this by drafting one of the best pitchers in college baseball with these kind of unique characteristics. I think Dollander is actually a really good story as well. When we talked to him on our Hot Sheet show, he made the point he had 2 scholarship offers basically coming out of high school and went to Georgia Southern, kind of dominated, transferred to Tennessee. The key thing, and Geoff touched on this, when you're talking about how much of an impact can he make in the big leagues in 2025, one of the key things going for him is this isn't a guy who hasn't worked deep in games. This isn't a guy who hasn't thrown innings. He threw 118 innings. And I know you may hear 118 innings in minor league baseball and go, wow, is that? No, nowadays that's actually a pretty good workload. He also, though, before that, he had pretty heavy workloads, reasonable workloads, but he worked, pretty full workloads at Tennessee before that as well, Georgia Southern as well. So this is a guy who, the best way I can put it is if you put him in the rotation early this season, you're not going to come to July and say, oops, he's already out of innings. Now, you might get to August, you might get to September, and you're skipping a start every now and then. But at the same time, we are talking about a guy who has shown that he can kind of hold up, has shown that he can handle a pro workload of some sorts. So you put the stuff combined with the fact that this is the guy who has shown some tendencies maybe to be a horse, and this is actually something for Rockies fans to get excited about.
Yeah, and I think it's very realistic that he could be somebody that potentially even breaks camp with the team. He's obviously going to be up against it in terms of NL Rookie of the Year. Even in his own division, obviously with Roki Sasaki in that division, it could be an uphill battle. But he's probably shown maybe a little bit more durability than Sasaki has, over the last handful of years. Of course, we're comparing college baseball, minor league baseball, to the highest level of Japanese baseball, which is not an even. But the Rockies sort of need something here, and this could be the beginning of sort of pushing this group of pitchers up to the major leagues. They have a few other guys sort of in the system that are more back end guys, but kind of interesting traits. They seem like they've been going after actually a lot of these low release height fastball guys. I bring that up again because there's one pitcher who's never given up a run in his first 2 career starts at Coors Field, and that's Kyle Harrison, who is also a low release height pitcher. So when you start to factor that sort of stuff in, I think there might be some secret sauce. Maybe the Rockies are potentially cracking something here. It's interesting, and I think for sure it's unusual that we would rank a Rockies pitcher as highly as we do in the top 100, or even have him number one in a pretty good system. But I think Dollander is just that talented and has traits that could potentially lead to success, no matter where he pitches.
I think it's always worth mentioning this, JJ. If you're a Rockies fan and you're watching this right now, you're super excited. Great. I might have a number one starter, one of the best talents arm-wise in the organization that they've ever had. But is there enough around him for this team to eventually be competitive? I don't even know if we're keeping track of a year of a rebuild for them, but it doesn't look like they want to really dance in the free agent market. Not even really crazy with trades, with dealing away some of their guys once they're in their prime. Ryan McMahon was the prime example. It seemed like a couple years ago they could have gotten themselves a nice prospect or two. So are they going to be able to build somewhat of a prospect capital powerhouse to be able to compete in the NL West, or are they just in abyss forever?
Well, the thing that you just mentioned, like you can go back to Trevor Story as another example of that, where it's just hard to see what is the goal that the Rockies are pushing for. Now, if Dollander really, comes in and pitches the way we expect and hope he will, that'll be a big impact for them. They do have some young talent here, up the middle, the outfield. If everyone in the outfield plays to the level they have in their best year, they could have a pretty solid outfield out there. Doyle's had a good year. Nolan Jones had a good year 2 years ago. But you put it all together and you say, is this team when is this team going to contend in the NL West? I would struggle to say, any time in the rest of this decade, because if you look at it, we know the Dodgers are going to be good. The Padres are way better than right now. The Diamondbacks went to the World Series 2 years ago, have more young talent. And then we throw the Giants in, who kind of are regrouping a little bit. But when the Giants regroup, they sign free agents like Willy Adames. That's not something that is really something that the Rockies are doing. So, it can get better, but better right now, the goal seems to be, let's get to see this team can get to 81 or 82 wins. And that may be a pretty uphill climb, much less getting to 90 plus to contend in this division.
Yeah, it's a tough division. So we feel for you, Rockies fans, but there are worse situations. Not many, maybe 1 or 2 at this point. So at least they've got some talent in the pipeline. We are talking about every single organization and their top prospect, and then spilling the conversation into some others that you should be paying attention to. So make sure you check out all of the videos team by team here. We're releasing one per day during spring training.